All right, folks. It looks like most of us are here, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome and congratulations on being selected as members of the fifth cohort of the Culturally Relevant and Responsive Teaching Fellows Program. Over 40 UNLV STEM faculty and 29 graduate students have completed the fellowship experience to date, and we are excited to invite the 12 of you to join this community. We look forward to working with you over the next few weeks. We have a bit of a full agenda today. Next slide. There we go. We'll start today with introductions so you can get to know our team and each other, provide a bit of background on MSIs as the context in which we engage this work, and then we'll provide an overview of what you can expect as being CRRT fellows and the CRRT experience. Throughout the presentation, we will pause for questions, but feel free to ask clarifying questions along the way via chat, and we'll be mindful of the chat throughout. Finally, at the end of our time together, we'll leave you some time to complete a short survey or a pre-assessment. We believe in ongoing improvement, so this is an opportunity to kind of get that feedback from you all. So we'll go ahead and start with some quick introductions. I'll get us started. Hello, my name is Blanca Rincon, and I'm an associate professor of higher education at UNLV, and I study institutions of higher education and the people within them, our faculty, staff, and primarily our students, and how these individuals interact with and are changed by institutions of higher ed. I also serve as co-PI for the IU's HSI grant that funds a CRRT fellowship program.
Good morning, everyone. I am Aisha Jackson. I'm currently serving as the Associate Dean for Faculty and Inclusive Excellence in the College of Education. I'm also an Associate Professor of Teacher Education. My research background is really in culturally responsive and relevant approaches to teaching minoritized secondary students. And so I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Rincon over the last few years to translate this knowledge, not just into higher education, but also more specifically into higher education STEM.
Everyone, I'm Erica Marty. I'm also a co-PI transitioning to PI as we finish off this NSF grant. I'm not one of your content experts, but I'm here to make sure that you're aware of this grant and how it's providing this opportunity.
Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Morales Andres. I'm currently a master's student in higher education, and I'm serving as the graduate research assistant for this project.
Wonderful, thank you. Now we're going to take some time today to ask you all to unmute your mics and share your name, department, and what brings you here today. We'll do this popcorn style. And so we'll have one person introduce himself and then pass the mic to someone else on the call who hasn't been introduced. So it does require us to listen and be active listeners in this classroom space until everyone has gone. We do ask that you keep your introductions brief to about a minute, and I'm seeing Michael. We'll have Michael as the first person on my list under participants. So Michael, would you get us started?
I guess that's me. Hi, my name is Michael. I'm joining from Northern Nevada. I'm on a field trip right now, but I'm in a car, so I can join the meeting. I just arrived at UNLV. I'm in the Department of Geosciences, and I'm going to start teaching just now in the fall semester. So I have not really much experience with the US system yet and stuff like this. So yeah, all new to me anyway. So, hi, nice to meet you all.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll remember to pass the mic. Can we have Jan introduce themselves?
Hi, my name is Yan Hu, and I'm also from the Department of Geoscience. And I just teached my first semester, and I'm interested in participating in this program to enhance my ability to support students from diverse backgrounds and create a more inclusive learning environment. I want to incorporate practice that acknowledge and value students' cultural experiences, which I believe is essential for meaningful engagement and academic success. That's all. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Can we get Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie Tyler. I'm also in the Department of Geosciences. I'm just interested in learning about new ways to better serve our students. We have such a variety of students from different backgrounds, and I'm always trying to connect with them. I'll pass the mic to Hannes, who is also from our department.
Thanks, Carrie. Hello, everyone. My name is Hannes. As Carrie mentioned, I'm also in the Department of Geoscience, and I'm also here because, I mean, this program intrigued me. We never get training on these things when we start being a professor. So as a new assistant professor, I also want to improve my teaching and how to engage with students. And I'll pass on the mic to Donald.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name's Donald Price. I'm in the School of Life Sciences. I'm an evolutionary biologist. I'm not a new faculty member. I've been at UNLV since 2016, and before that, I was at University of Hawaii, where there I worked a lot with Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander cultures to bring them into STEM and particularly biology. And of course, since coming here, it's a different culture, the ninth island we call Las Vegas. But there's certainly quite a diversity of cultures here, and the Latinx culture is quite a vibrant culture in my classroom and the students in my lab. Many of them come from quite diverse cultures. So good to be here. And I will pass it on. I got to find out how to find who's here. Let me see. How about Ji Chang Lee?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jin Chuan Chen. I'm an associate professor at University of Nevada. The Nevada Institute of Personalized Medicine. I didn't involve a lot in class teaching, but I have a lot of mentoring experience in my lab with different background students. Normally, there are more than 10 students in my lab, so I would like to learn more about how to understand them better and how to help them with my lab research funding. Thank you. I'm be happy to hear. I would see, how about Ji Chun Lee?
Yes, my name is Ji-Chun Lee, so I'm a professor at the Department of Mathematics Science. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to participate in this kind of program because even though I've been here for a while, but never got this kind of opportunity to train myself. Okay, so that's why I'm really excited to join this program. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
I can jump in and introduce myself from
Wonderful.
here. I'll popcorn myself. My kernel will explode. Hi, my name is Joey Wilcox. I am with the School of Life Sciences, under the dean's purview. I'm like jack of all trades, master of none. I just joined UNLV in January, and I co-taught a few classes. But I was a former student of UNLV, and I'm one of those people who've been through the entire cycle of teaching. I went through middle school, high school, undergrad, graduate, medical school, and now I'm back to this area. So I'm here to try to just figure out how to become a better teacher, because that's, that I'm always trying to pick up anything that I can do to become better for my students, for my community, and for my colleagues. So anything I can use, anything I can do to make that better. So nice to meet everybody.
Okay, hello, my name is Yan Zhou. I'm from the physics and astronomy. I joined UNLV in 2020. I'm not new. The reason that the motivation I come here is I want to in my class, I teach in quantum mechanics, but I want to attracting more and more students in my class. You know, the enrollment in physics is not very high. So I want to know that whether I can improve my teaching and trying to convince more student is interested in physics, especially in quantum science. Nice to see you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael Pravica. I'm also a professor of physics, and I've been teaching since, at least as a graduate student, since 1989. And before I was at UNLV, I was at New Mexico Highlands University in the original Las Vegas, New Mexico. And I also served as a consultant for Diné College, which is the largest Navajo-controlled tribal college in the world. And so I've had a long-term interest in MSIs. And so I always feel I can get some, I'm always up for learning about different strategies. And ironically, I was just asked to write a chapter for a book that is being planned by Northern Arizona University about STEM and MSIs. And my chapter was developing strategies for encouraging all students into STEM. So I'm kind of excited to be here and learn more and more, get ideas. Thank you.
Anything for this one?
I'll jump in. I'm Julie Cohen. I'm the Assistant Director for the Teaching and Learning Commons. So I'm actually here in part to go through the training and sort of see how the TLC is able to offer support. My background as a history professor for about 15 years, and that's my training. So I'm actually also looking forward to hearing more about the STEM classroom, as my background's more in humanities. And it's great to meet you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Jiaqi Li, and currently I'm a PhD student and in computer science, and also at the same time I'm working as an instructor to teach undergraduate student programming like C++. So for here I have a lot to learn, and I'm looking forward to improve my teaching skill, and also I see there are a lot of professors here, and also improve my academic research. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think we have a couple folks who haven't gone. I believe Zach.
Hey everyone, my name is Zach Brazan. I'm an assistant professor in geoscience. I'm looking forward to the program because we have a wide variety of students from different backgrounds and classrooms, and I'll be able to connect with them more. And I'll pass it off to Thomas, I think is the last one.
Thanks, Zach. My name is Thomas Bose. I'm also in the geoscience department. I've wrapped up my first year teaching here at UNLV, which has been a very humbling experience. And so any opportunity to increase my diversity in teaching and be able to get it across the students is going to be very helpful in my career. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have many opportunities to continue to get to know each other. We'll be spending quite a few weeks together, and I'm excited to continue building these relationships and building this faculty learning community. So we'll go ahead and move on to kind of the context in which we do this work around understanding minority serving institutions. As we've alluded to in our introductions, the CRRT Fellows Program is funded by an NSF Improving Undergraduate STEM Education HSI grant. And just as a reminder, We'll pause intermittently for questions, and we'll also share these slides with you via web campus, so don't feel the need to take copious notes. So let's get started with a quick warm-up question. I'm going to ask you all to engage the chat. At the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see kind of like a little cloud or word bubble with 3 little dots. And the questions I'd like you all to respond to are, what does it mean to you? What comes to mind to be minority serving? And when did you first learn that UNLV was an MSI? Okay, beautiful. So we're starting to see some answers come in. Okay, so there's something about a percentage of students, and specifically minority students. Okay, and racial minority students. Okay, so there's something around students not being adequately represented in higher education. And folks are saying they heard that we were in MSI about 7 years ago. Okay. So upon coming to the university in 2015, you learned that we were at an MSI. Okay. Does anyone happen to know what type of MSI UNLV is? Okay, so we're an HSI. What else? A Hispanic serving institution and an ANAPISI. That's right. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Does anyone happen to know which designation UNLV received first? That's kind of like your bonus question. HSI, everyone always thinks we became an HSI first, but we actually received our ANAPISI designation first in 2012, and that's actually the first grant that we received. And following that, we received our HSI designation in 2015, so 3 years after receiving the ANAPISI designation. Wonderful. Okay, so let's kind of dive in. Thank you all for participating. So now we know that the chat works and y'all can ask questions throughout. So let's get into some definitions. So let's start with the minority serving institution definition. This is an umbrella term that we use for different types of federally recognized MSI designations. Since UNLV is a dual designated MSI, we'll start first with our ANAPISI designation, or the Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander Serving Institution designation. Kind of a mouthful, so I'll be using the acronyms throughout. This is the federal definition as per the Higher Education Act, but I always like for us to think as members of the institution how we adopt these definitions to make sense for us, right? And I'll share a little bit more about why that is in a second. ANAPISIs are institutions of higher ed that enroll at least 10% ANAPI identifying students at the undergraduate level. That's important. So we're looking at undergraduate enrollment. And upon receiving the designation, these institutions become eligible for federal funding, right? We can apply for competitive funding. And UNLV has received several HSI and ANAPISI grants, both through the Department of Ed. I believe we have some kind of like smaller grants through the Department of Defense and the National Science Foundation. And these are, there are other kind of enrollment-based MSIs, but we'll be focusing on those that UNLV has for today. One of the reasons why I have us really think about what these designations mean for us at our institution is that these designations can be lost from one year to the next if student enrollment changes. So if we drop down to 9% enrollment for ANAPI students, we no longer qualify for the ANAPISI designation. Okay, and in 2020, next slide, There were 199 federally designated ANAPISIs in the US. This is a map kind of showing where they're geographically located, and we see that primarily they're located on our coasts, with California being home to the most ANAPISIs at 87. They make up approximately 6% of all institutions of higher education, and 35% of these institutions are two-year institutions. The next definition that we'll discuss is our Hispanic Serving Institution, or HSI designation. In 1992, as per the Higher Education Act, HSIs were defined as institutions that enrolled at least 25% Latinx or Hispanic identifying students at the undergraduate level. So you'll see that these thresholds are different for different racial minority groups. In 2023-2024, there were 615 designated HSIs in the US, and that number continues to grow. The majority were located on the West and Southwest, where we have historically seen a bigger Latinx presence. Again, California is home to the most HSIs with 171 HSIs. However, we're continuing to see changes in where HSIs are found, primarily in the Midwest and Southeast. So you'll be able to see the EHSI designation, and that is a designation not federally recognized, but kind of a way to capture institutions that are right at that threshold of becoming HSIs. And HSIs make up approximately 18% of all institutions in higher ed and enroll 67% of all Latinx students. The majority of these institutions are two-year public institutions, and these are some of the most racially diverse institutions in the nation. They also enroll 41% of all AAPI, 24% of all Black African American students, and 16% of all white students. Importantly, while we've been kind of talking about these thresholds that define these, what we call enrollment-based institutions, this actually wasn't the intention of early advocates. So they advocated for approximately 10 years before the HSI designation was actually adopted into the Higher Education Act in 1992. This included a coalition of 10 social, political, and legal Latinx advocacy orgs that paved the way for HSIs, and they dreamed of these HSIs as being more than just this threshold, right? They wanted these institutions to show evidence of serious commitment to the needs of Hispanic learners and community, including staffing patterns in terms of faculty and administrators, as well as offerings, academic offerings that were responsive to the needs of the local community. And you're probably the most familiar with historically Black colleges and universities. While ANAPISIs and HSIs are newer designations, MSIs have existed for over 180 years prior to any formal recognition. The first of these are what we call our mission-based MSIs. These institutions have a historical mission to serve Black and Native communities. These are historically Black colleges and universities and our tribal colleges and universities. For the purpose of today, I'll focus primarily on HBCUs just to kind of give you a sense of the breadth of MSIs and the importance of really thinking about the origins of what it means to be an MSI, as well as how we think about enrollment-based institutions versus mission-based institutions. So historically, Black colleges and universities were founded with a unique history of service to Black communities. These were established primarily through missionary groups, including the African Methodist Episcopal Church, Northern Philanthropists, and the Freedmen's Bureau. These are our private HBCUs. Many of these have a mission to produce Black leaders to support racial uplift. And in 1890, the Second Morrill Act established 17 public HBCUs to parallel existing white land grants in the South and border states. So this was a codifying of racial segregation at Southern land grant institutions. With the passage of the Higher Education Act of 1965, HBCUs were redefined as any college or university that was established prior to 1964, whose principal mission was and is the education of Black Americans. And this provided an opportunity for these institutions to receive federal support, although this was not exclusively aimed at HBCUs. So you're probably wondering why the date of 1964. So this is when the desegregation of historically white colleges and universities began. So 20 years later, after the HBCU was recognized in the Higher Education Act, the Strengthening Historically Black Colleges and Universities clause was added to the Higher Education Act to provide non-competitive federal funding for HBCUs. And this is important to remedy past injustices. And here I'm going to add racial injustices, right? So the history of slavery in the US and long periods of federal underfunding and neglect of HBCUs. And so we have to think about like, well, what's the continued relevance of MSIs today? So we've already talked about how they're enrolling a greater proportion of students of color in higher education. But we also have to think about the other important the other important outcomes or purposes that we see. So MSIs serve the purpose of providing post-secondary education, right, for students who have been excluded from participating. They're also sites of cultural preservation, including language revitalization efforts, racial and community uplift. So HBCUs played an important and prominent role in the civil rights movement and student activism in the 1960s, which led to establishing many of the cultural centers and ethnic studies programs we see in higher education today. They also played an important role in preparing professionals of color in high need areas, including a disproportionate number of engineers, educators, and doctors, many of whom often return to communities of color to work. And so I think the numbers for engineering, for example, are around 40%. So HSIs produce 40% of all Latino engineers in the US, which is pretty incredible if we think about their underrepresentation as a whole. Okay, so we sit with kind of this idea of servingness, especially for our enrollment-based institutions. So what does it mean to serve? And we have scholars in higher education who have kind of entertained this very question. And so we have kind of this typology that's introduced by Gina Garcia. And she was interested in looking at how stakeholders at HSIs made sense of what it meant to be Hispanic serving. And what she found is that these stakeholders would often categorize their institution based on whether or not they were meeting educational outcomes and whether the curriculum or the institution was culturally reflective of the needs of Latinx students. So this is a framework that came out of studying Hispanic serving institutions, but I think it's useful for studying other enrollment-based serving MSIs, right? And so we have kind of this enrolling category or typology of institutions in the bottom left corner. So these are institutions that meet enrollment, but may lack organizational outcomes or supports for Latinx students. Then we have kind of these MSIs that are producing, right? So they're effective in graduating and training, maybe Latinx students for careers, but may lack any organizational support for the development of Latinx students. And then on the other end, we have institutions that draw on cultural practices and norms to support Latinx students, but may not be producing equitable outcomes, such as graduation rates, or social mobility are some other outcomes that we typically look at. And then kind of like what we're aiming for is this servingness, right? Which reflects both an institution who's able to produce equitable outcomes and draws on cultural underpinnings of our students, or is reflective of our students' cultural backgrounds in support of their education. And there are some colleges that have now adopted this concept of thriving. So we're not just serving, but we actually have a group of students who are thriving at our institutions. I believe this was first adopted by UC Irvine, and you can learn more about that if you look up their website. But we really use this framework to guide the development of our CRRT Fellows program, right? So we're going to actually have one of our modules that focuses really on looking at some of these educational outcomes and how we use different indicators in terms of our data available to us to kind of track where we are in terms of this servingness. So we're going to kind of go into it slightly here, just to kind of show you what you'll be doing, I believe, next week. So we'll start with enrollment, right? So we see that UNLV is enrolling both API and Latinx students beyond these enrollment thresholds, right? But we can also think about different ways of comparing these numbers, right? So we can look at these numbers in relation to the representation of Latinx and Asian communities in Las Vegas, right? So according to the census data, Las Vegas was 7% Asian and 36% Latino. So this is pretty comparable, right, in terms of numbers, slightly overrepresented in terms of our Asian students. And what I'll share here is that IPEDS, because you're seeing IPEDS in the presentation, stands for the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, and that's kind of where the institution reports their data. So these are our numbers that are publicly available to you all, but that's kind of our starting point, right? So we've met enrollment, right? Check, check. All right, so if we go then to kind of these educational outcomes, and I'll note here that I tried to update this slide. So these are older data, but this data is no longer publicly available on our UNLV website. You can imagine why that's so, but I think these data are still paint a picture in terms of the equity gaps that continue to persist. Prior to these data here in 2019, these gaps had persisted for a decade. And I do know that we've actually made quite a few gains in terms of our graduation rates, but I think this is still useful in terms of thinking about the equity gaps in terms of first-year retention and graduation rates. So when we look at the non-minority, or that kind of red bar, in comparison to our Hispanic bar, which I think is like the purplish color, you'll see that that's pretty comparable. So that's about 77% to 78%. And so in terms of first year retention, we're not doing too bad. You can also look at our Asian students, our Black students here, where we have more gaps for first year retention, as well as our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. And this is really an opportunity to think about how racial data disaggregation becomes important. So typically we lump in Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders with our Asian students, but we see that there's actually quite a big difference in terms of outcomes there. And when we look at 6-year graduation rates, we see these gaps widen. So about 50% in 2019, 50% of our non-minority students graduated within 6 years. And we had a 10 percentage gap for our Latino Hispanic students. Non-minority and white students. Yeah, so they're mostly the same. So our non-minority or the red bar includes our white students and our 2 or more races group. And it may actually include our Asian students here as well. But it doesn't include our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students. So you can look at, you can use a different comparison, right? So you could look at our white students as a comparison here as well. And so we see that then the gap for our Native Hawaiian students and our non-minority students is about 20%. And the gap between our Black students and our non-minority students is about 25%. So we have some pretty big gaps in terms of graduation rates. And these are some of the metrics we can use. These are kind of the traditional metrics, but there are others that we can think about. All right. So that's kind of painting a picture of where we are in terms of that typology. It looks like we're enrolling It's questionable as to whether we're producing at an equitable rate, again, because we don't have the more updated numbers, but I imagine that these equity gaps have continued to persist, maybe, and I hope not to the same extent, but I invite you to look at the data for your department and your program area. And in terms of culturally enhancing, the culturally enhancing element, this is why we're here today. So I do have one reflection question that I want you all to engage with in our chat, or you can unmute yourself before we move on to the next section, which is how does this information change how you viewed UNLV, if at all, as an HSI and a PC? And I'll wait you all out. So here we go. It demonstrates how important UNLV is to our local community. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that we should be responsive to our community. Community needs. How much work still ahead of us, right? The opportunity to engage in this work. Maybe it confirmed some of the expectations you might have already had. Thank you, Donald. Yeah, so thinking about the culturally enhancing component as we think about what it means to serve. Love that. Any others? All right. I know I just talked at you for about 20 minutes. Oh, I love that. Okay, see more rolling in. But I want to also take the time now to pause for any questions. Oh yeah, 70% of our students are from racial minority groups. All right, if there aren't any other questions, I'll leave the second question for you all to kind of munch on later in the day. And we'll go ahead and pass the mic to our fearless leader, our PI for the grant.
All right, hi again, everyone. We can go ahead and move to the next slide where I'm going to talk a little bit more about the grant and what's funding this program, this opportunity that you're participating in. And as Blanca already mentioned, it's a IUSE grant, Improving Undergraduate Serving Institutions, specifically in area focusing on HSI. And so this grant that we put together, a team both in engineering and in College of Education. Our grant is titled Critical Transitions in Civil Engineering Degree, and the word transcend comes from if you take away the word critical and you piecemeal together the rest of the words, that's how you end up with transcend. And then the idea being that we want students to move up, to advance, so that continuing with that same idea. We found that we were struggling with retention and graduation. This is true in the College of Engineering. We've seen some advancements, but it was especially true in civil engineering. We were struggling with retention rates that were even after the first year in the 60s or 70s%, and then graduation rates that were for a while below 30% for 6-year graduation, which is definitely not where we want to be. So we decided to focus on the first 2 years. Typically, when students are reaching their 3rd year, or we consider advanced standing, when they're taking their upper division courses, then they're more likely to graduate. But we were losing a lot within their first 2 years, and so that became the focus of our grant. And if we could get them to make that critical transition to advanced standing, where they're taking those upper division courses and still continue to support them, then we were able to increase our graduation rate. But I want to point out that our mission is beyond just these numbers that we can report to state or Department of Education. We're not just looking to increase the numbers, but taking account that we are an access institution and MSI. So I'd say there's even more need to ensure that our students are graduating because of the opportunities that higher education can provide, and especially in the STEM field, they're often very well-paying jobs. So we want to make sure that our students are getting those advancement opportunities. And next slide. So the Transcend grant, we have 3 components or 3 tiers. There's cohesion, curriculum, and culture. And we can see from the diagram here, longer names of them. Cohesion is our cohesive community building. Curriculum is our coherent curriculum development. And then the culture is the culturally responsive training and teaching that you guys are participating in. And then it encompasses students, faculty, and then these other projects. And next slide. So to give you a little sense of these other areas, the cohesion building, this is one that I take part in and focus on. It's known from literature that if students feel a sense of belonging, if they have a community, they're more likely to stick with activities, especially when they're difficult. So they're more likely to persist and graduate. So we wanted to set up a way that we could increase sense of belonging through creating a community, creating a network. So we have social activities as well as activities that are helping our students learn early on more about their civil engineering and construction management disciplines or the courses that they're take in the future. We have community-based projects. So our students were able to work with organizations in the community and use their understanding of the engineering design process, our framework for how we go about solving problems in engineering. And they were able to work with those community partners to help them with a particular problem or challenge that they were facing. And so we've worked with several different partners over the past 5 years. It's also a way to create community and get students together with our faculty, get them to know some graduate students, help them network early with their peers, and also get to meet industry professionals early on. So they're really building a long network. And the next slide. Our second component, the coherent curriculum development. We focused on 2 main areas. One is vertical alignment, which helps the students to better understand how courses are connected to each other. They're often only aware that they get a piece of paper, here's what they have to take. How does one class connect to another? Where do things build in each other? So we're trying to integrate that better within our curriculum so students are understanding where these connection points are. And on top of that, we're developing master plans so that we have more consistent curriculum among our early courses, our first and second year courses. And then we added a new course at our sophomore level. We already had basically an introduction to overall engineering at the freshman level. That's a college-wide course. But then we were building an introduction to civil engineering and construction management at our sophomore level to give them, again, more insight into what they will do in their field. Next slide. And then our third component is where you're participating, the culturally responsive and relevant teaching, bringing faculty and PhD students together for these training workshops to basically improve overall our ability to work with such a diverse student population that we have and incorporate cultural intelligence, cultural humility. And I think you'll get a lot more through these sessions about this particular component, so I don't have to speak too much on this. And with that, those are the 3 areas of our grant and the purpose and the funding of this. And I will turn it over to Aisha to talk further about the CRRT component.
Thank you for that wonderful transition. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the CRRT component, which will be the bulk of how we're spending our time together this summer. As Blanca mentioned earlier, you are part of cohort 5, so congratulations again. This work is continuing to build on the foundation of the IU's grant to ensure that our UNLV community is as prepared as possible to serve the students, as Blanca was defining servingness. Beyond just enrolling and graduating, we want to really provide a quality education that honors all of the assets that learners bring with them to UNLV. So the project objective aligns with much of what was already said that brought you to this CRRT summer experience. We hope to help you all develop additional skills and strategies to implement culturally relevant and responsive teaching. So in the chat, or if anybody would like to come off of mute and start a discussion briefly, what does culturally relevant and or responsive teaching mean to you? If anyone is familiar with these terms and what they mean, give a reaction, thumbs up, wave.
I just, my experience with teaching minority students is to, first of all, recognize their cultural identity, to give them a safe space, a feeling of trust that I'm there to help them, and a safe space, that they're going to be able to learn and not be afraid to ask me questions. I remember one experience many years ago in Las Vegas, New Mexico, where I had a Native American student, and I just noticed that it was hard to connect with him. I would shake his hand, and I wouldn't get like that feeling of a reciprocal. And I found out many years later when I was at Dene College that it takes a lot of getting to know somebody from that community to really be able to connect with them. And it was just fascinating because I realized that, you think, as a professor, all your students and, of course we're focusing on physics. So, to me, it's not an issue what their background is. If they can solve a problem for me, they have my respect. But at the same time, it made me realize that you actually do need to, if you want them to learn, you have to get them to trust you as their professor, as their mentor, somebody who's going to guide them. And so actually it's extremely important. So, sometimes with my Latino students, they're shocked that I can speak a little Spanish with them. Like, we joke around, but I think that makes them feel comfortable that, like, wow, this is somebody who respects our culture. And so I think it's from that standpoint of trust that's the most important thing, to get them to realize that they're going to learn from me. And I'm going to learn from them too, by the way.
Exactly. Thank you. That was a wonderful answer that grounds a lot of the principles that we're going to talk about for culturally relevant and responsive teaching. Does anybody else have a response, either in the chat or coming off mute? I see in the chat, meeting students where they're at, create a sense of belonging, community, contextualize content, encourage students to leverage their cultural capital. Exactly. Awesome. Thank you. So the terms culturally relevant teaching and culturally responsive teaching are coming from the work of Geneva Gay and Gloria Ladson-Billings. When we talk about culturally responsive teaching, we're pulling from both Ladson-Billings and Gay, and I'm going to briefly go through the 8 principles that we use to create the foundation of our professional development. Geneva Gay argues that culturally responsive teaching is normative and ethical. And what that really is saying, as Michael was giving the example, the way that we interact with other people is culturally coded. And we take a lot of things that are normal for us to be normative. Culturally responsive teaching teaches us that we have an ethical imperative to learn about those normative ways of being and knowing of cultures different from our own. Oftentimes, teaching and learning is grounded in taken for granted Eurocentric norms and perspectives, but culturally responsive teaching says teaching and learning is not cultureless. We can't just expect students to do reading, writing, and arithmetic if we're not teaching in a way that aligns with how they learn. Culturally responsive teaching is also validating. It's a way of honoring the ways that students come into the classroom with background knowledge that might look very different from the ways that we've learned about our own content. So we bring in those students' ways of knowing, that prior knowledge that might be grounded in their cultural backgrounds and experiences, and we validate that. We help them see where those assets lie and how to utilize the cultural capital, as we talked about earlier. Culturally responsive teaching is comprehensive and inclusive. It's not just about that curriculum, but it's really meeting the holistic needs of teaching to the whole person in front of us. It's attending to the social, the emotional, the physical, and the political. And that's one of the contributions that Gloria Ladson-Billings really brings to this work. There is a social justice component of culturally relevant and responsive teaching. It's also humanistic, building on those ways of helping students self-actualize, understanding what their full potential is, believing in the ability of all of our students to academically succeed, aligning our curriculum, our teaching, our engagement with that belief, and then supporting students through self-actualization. It's multidimensional in the ways that it attends not just to the content, but how we're delivering that content, what the learning environment looks like, the assessments that we use, the opportunities to engage in the classroom. So it's really attending to the learning environment in its totality. And it should be both empowering and transformative. It should help students really understand their environment outside of the classroom as well as inside, how they are agents of change, how the education that we're providing them creates an opportunity for them to be more actively engaged in creating a more socially just environment for us all. Ladson-Billings adds to this the idea that students must experience academic success. That is our responsibility as educators to create the context where that is not just possible, it's likely. They also must develop and or maintain their own sense of cultural competence while learning to engage in the culture of power or that normative way of being in society. And they should also develop a stronger critical consciousness that helps them realize where those areas of transformation become important, and then how to utilize, again, the content-specific information to be change agents. So in terms of what we are going to do today, we're going to briefly go through the goals of CRRT. I'll talk about the schedule, which you should have all received via email. I will explain our deliverables, and then we'll quickly kind of talk about the expectations for the summer. In terms of the goals of CRRT and how we will kind of create this learning environment and experience together, we're asking that you will all attend as many of these modules with us this summer as possible. We are recording them so that if you have to miss, you'll still be able to engage. Some of these opportunities will come with pre-work, and we hope that you will be able to come prepared with that pre-work being either read or done, engaged with in some way, so that we get the most out of our 2 hours every session. And then we're hoping that we're preparing you to implement the strategies that we are learning about and practicing this summer, so that you will be able to have a syllabus, which I'll talk about in a few slides, or some additional materials that will directly impact the way that you teach and you engage with students beginning in the fall. So how will we accomplish these goals? We're going to talk about the importance of self-awareness and increasing our own understanding of not only our personal cultural backgrounds, but how culture impacts teaching and learning. It's important that we build rapport. We're hoping to model the kind of learning environment that we'd like to see you creating in your courses with your students. And so Dr. Marti talked about earlier the importance of that community engagement. You'll be split into cohort 5A, cohort 5B. You'll be spending some more time together and really getting to know each other, maybe struggling together and learning together. And that part of the active learning is something that is important as a principle and hallmark of CRRT. And then again, throughout this experience, you will learn to employ the CRRT principles and practices that I just briefly reviewed. You should have all received a copy of the summer schedule. Again, this PowerPoint will be available to you in Web Campus for your review. I just want to highlight really quickly that June 13th will only be for the Teaching and Learning Commons. So Julie, that's a day just for you and me and anyone else that you might want to bring in from the Teaching and Learning Commons to talk about how we could build a faculty development program similar to this for the entire UNLV community. So everybody else, you get a week off. And then the deliverables. What are those actionable items that we hope you will take with us? First, there are assessment activities. As Blanca mentioned earlier, you'll start with a pre-assessment this afternoon. You will go through that pre-assessment to kind of help us get a sense of who are the learners in this community. What do you already know? How do we align our approach to your strengths and your assets and your learning needs? And then you'll have a post survey at the end of our summer experience. In the middle of that with the modules, there will also be reflective questions that we're going to ask that you complete. And again, that gives us a sense of whether or not we need to revisit certain topics, whether or not we're meeting your learning needs and expectations. For the module participation, as I mentioned, some of them will come with pre-work that we're hoping you will engage with before we meet on Fridays. When that does happen, you'll have access to all of the materials in Web Campus. We ask that you participate just like you are today, coming off of mute, joining us in the chat. We'll have some breakout sections with cohort 5A, cohort 5B, many opportunities for you to be actively engaged. And we do have a final action project. It's going to be a syllabus audit, and I'll give a little bit of detail on that today, and you'll have an entire session dedicated to this activity later in the summer. So that you are prepared to be successful at the end of this experience from the beginning, we'll take a moment and we'll talk about your syllabus audit. Throughout the summer, we're going to spend time really honing in on those principles of culturally relevant and responsive teaching. And through that, we want you to think about how students experience your courses. We're going to give you a reading, rethinking the course syllabus, ask that you choose one course that you plan to teach in the fall. For anyone who is not currently teaching in the fall, you have options to either ask a colleague, or I wrote down earlier that I'm trying to find the name, Chen, you are in a lab. We'll find a way to modify this so that you are getting some sort of deliverable that is immediately actionable for you in the fall. So if there's a lab activity that you want to modify, that could be another way to think about this final project. So choose a syllabus, choose a final project or something from your lab that you will do a deep dive into. There are guiding questions that will provide that lead you to assess what are you currently doing in this course, in this lab experience. Where are the opportunities to incorporate additional CRRT principles? And how could you revise the syllabus? And then we're going to ask you to actually then take some time to revise that syllabus to align it with the work of this summer experience. And then write a brief reflection about the choices that you've made, why you've made them, what difference you think that those choices will have in terms of the student learning outcomes and experience, and then how the CRRT principles are reflected in your revised syllabus or lab experience. Are there any questions before we jump into the logistics? Seeing none, Melissa.
Hello, everyone. I will just talk briefly about the logistics and give time for a Q&A. So this presentation, along with other information regarding each module, as said before, can be found in our shared web campus page. You will have access to the pre-module materials, be able to submit the post-module reflections, and find other resources in this web campus. So please click around and familiarize yourself with this web campus hub if you haven't done so already. Everyone should have access as of this morning, but if you encounter any issues accessing or with any problems in the modules, please let me know. So each module will be available for you prior to the corresponding meetings in order to access the pre-module materials. And under each module on the web campus, you'll find post-module reflections with questions specific to that topic. So here we have examples from the module 2 that you'll see, but the prompts will shift slightly each time to reflect each module's focus. So this will just be for module 2. And then just a few reminders. Please ensure to complete the module reflections within a week. In addition to the web campus, you should have also received Google Calendar invitations for all our meetings. The Zoom link will remain the same for each session, and you'll get an automatic reminder one day before each meeting. So far, we've covered the learning outcomes, schedule, and deliverables. With that in mind, here are 4 expectations to guide your experience in this program. First is trust the process. For one, leading up to and actually still happening now, there are a lot of thoughtful planning, as you've seen in the sequence and scaffolding of the material. There is a lot of purpose in the process. Second, we invite you to lean into the discomfort. It's okay with being and feeling uncomfortable. This work may be challenging for your thinking, and that's a good thing. Growth comes and often happens when we push beyond what feels familiar or comfortable. And third, we ask you to be present. We know a lot of you are balancing a lot of things, but we encourage you to bring a different kind of mindfulness here, which is fully engaging with the material and with each other. And finally, as much as you might want to be told exactly what to do, don't expect an answer on how to do it right, as the answer will be different and will look different for each of you, and you will need to work to figure out how this translates to your content area specifically. So this program isn't just about individual development, it's about shared learning experiences. So if we all come together in this openness, curiosity, and a willingness to engage deeply, we're all setting the stage for a meaningful progress during this project. So with that all being said, if you haven't already done so, or to start off, if anyone has any questions before we take a group photo, you can open your mics or also chat, use the chat box as well. If not, if you haven't already done so, please turn on your cameras so we can all take a group photo for the CRRT Fellows Summer 2025 project. And go ahead. Don't see everyone's cameras on, but I will just take it as is. I'll give them some time.
If you're able to, can you please turn on your camera? See, there's about 4 of us. 4. Okay, we'll give you one more second. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, folks. Do you want to do a countdown, Melissa? Okay.
3, 2, 1. All right, I think I got it. All right, and then lastly, here are just some contact information if needed. So there's the finances with Susmita, and then as mentioned, there's the cohort 5A and cohort 5B. So you can reach out to Dr. Rincon if you're in cohort 5A and Dr. Jackson if you're in cohort 5B. You'll be able to see also what groups you're in Web Campus under people. If you look under groups, they'll be sectioned off as 5A and 5B. And then again, if you have any questions or concerns about the Web Campus or Google Calendar / Zoom, feel free to contact me as well. And now I'll give you all time to fill out the pre-assessment survey. You should be able to scan the QR code, but if you don't have a mobile available, I will also drop the link in the chat for you all as well.
And Melissa, maybe, oh, go ahead. Maybe we end with the Q&A and then come back to this, the pre-assessment survey. Yeah. So if there's any questions that you all may have, we'll take them at this time, and then we'll give you time to take that pre-assessment survey.
Can I clarify? I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Melissa had mentioned the Web Campus. So if I sign into Web Campus, then there's going to be a course then that's this one, the CRRT? Okay, so that's where all that information will be on Web Campus. Okay.
Correct. We just made it public today, so if you had the link and it didn't go anywhere, that's why. We're adding it. Okay, beautiful. Thank you, Carrie, for sharing it in the chat. Love this community building that's happening already. Any other questions? Okay, well, we'll stick around for folks who may have questions and who might be a little shy still to ask them in the larger group. Again, we have the link here for the pre-assessment survey for you all, and you are welcome to complete it within the next few minutes, because we had that 2-hour blocked off, so that we can have that information to guide our work. Thank you all for joining us.